What's up, guys? I hope you're doing well. Just going more over some of the kind of data and stuff like that for like renewables and energy efficiency and stuff like that. Kind of more of like the goals and stuff, I guess, is what I found. Something called IRENAs. I'm guessing some International Renewable Energy something association. Just by guessing, I mean, I guess IRENA, International Renewable Energy Agency. That's what it stands for. Um, So just kind of going over one of their things, just checking it out because seeing what they're actually up to and what exactly they want. So we'll hop over straight to the screen share. Make sure it's working. There. Okay. So basically my biggest thing is got this graphic. I want to make sure that you guys can actually see it. I'm not blocking it. Yeah. So it looks like this is kind of their projection, I guess, or what they want. And so I'm assuming this is total amount of CO2 in gigatons, and like kind of the percentage base of what they want or how we're going to get there. They don't really. There's no caption really. Um, it's just kind of a random image in the middle of it. It's their outlook for priorities to reach their this 1.5 degrees Celsius goal, I guess. Um, at least to get there by 2050, and they say we have to get here by 2030 in order to do that, or that it's critical to accelerating the trajectory. So basically, anything short of radical action in the coming years will diminish, even eliminate chances to meet our climate goals, comments Francesco La Camera, Director General of IRENA. So 80% of the global population lives in countries that are net importers of fossil fuels. By contrast, renewables are available in all countries, offering a way out of import dependency and allowing countries to decouple economies from the cost of fossil fuels while driving economic growth and new jobs. Um, so, kind of one of the things that I always like to point out in terms of the whole green energy push and stuff like that is you can't ignore physics. Um, Now, my problem always comes when these decisions are taken purely on a political basis, which unfortunately seems to be rather frequent. Um, However, I mean, like as long as the energy is there, I mean, energy is the economy when you really think about it. Because if you don't have energy, you can't move anything, you can't make anything, you can't really do anything. Basically, all of human existence, as we know it, is pretty much predicated on energy. And so, at for the past however many hundred years, oil and fossil fuels have basically been the dominant driver for that. Ever since the Industrial Revolution. So if the whole like green revolution, so to speak, um, is the new next thing, then as long as we can at least fulfill our necessary needs for just life in general, however how we get that energy just kind of depends. You have to remember with anything with economics, there are no solutions, only trade-offs, as said like Thomas Sowell. So if you want to if those trade-offs are a net benefit, then by all means go for it. But if it's not and it's done purely for political reasons, then it's why bother? Um, but again, that's a rather nuanced question, and there's a lot that goes into it, and that's kind of the reason for these videos as well, is kind of like showing you, um, just people watching these videos to kind of like how I'm going about trying to learn about it. And I have a few other, I have some actual like peer-reviewed articles that I'm going over that I plan on doing videos on in the future, just to kind of show and try to, as I kind of gain more understanding, and especially in the commodity space, and learn more about it. So again, going down here, it seems like they could achieve a cut of nearly 37 gigatons of annual CO2 emissions by 2050. And so I'm guessing this is what this graph is for. It's supposed to be the cut. So it's like cutting 37 gigatons of CO2. And so 25% of that cut comes from renewables, 25% from energy efficiency. Okay, now this graphic makes a lot more sense because this is how much they're expecting each individual, I guess, section to cut the amount of CO2 emissions. So 25% of this 37 gigatons of CO2 is supposed to come from making our energy sources more efficient. Um, Also, hydrogen's in there, electrification, stuff like that. Thing with electrification is you got to make the electricity first. So that really depends on, just because you're driving an electric car doesn't necessarily mean that it's more green. Um, just it depends on where you're getting that electricity. I think that definitely needs to be merited. Yes, you're not using the gasoline and those fossil fuels to power the car, but it's still like okay. But also, electric cars require, I think it's 5 times more copper than a regular combustion engine vehicle. So it's kind of like, again, you have to objectively look at the trade-offs for said transaction or whatever you want to call it. Some of the other priorities that they bring up, green hydrogen should move from niche to more mainstream. Okay, I've read some interesting things about like a hydrogen powered car, which is pretty cool. Um, haven't really looked too much into it, to be honest. And then the majority of car sales should be electric by 2030. Again, if an electric vehicle actually uses um, more fossil fuels and stuff, or emits more CO2 in its production, then that's pretty much negates the whole thing. Um, One thing you have to keep in note is like this is a whole progression. Like you have to remember the whole process from literally resources in the ground to finished product to really make an educated decision on it. Just because the final product itself may use less fossil fuels doesn't necessarily mean somewhere in the middle it was either made up or even more so than usual. And that's one of those things, to be honest, like I don't have exact numbers on that data, which is pretty much what these videos are for. Again, is to kind of, I plan on like going through finding how much CO2 does whatever do? Does it actually have an effect or whatever? That's kind of the whole point. Again, all new, another priority. So all new buildings must be energy efficient and renovation rates should be significantly increased, right? Um, One of the things that comes to mind is like, okay, how are we going to kind of enforce this priority? So are we going to force people to renovate their homes, or is it kind of just incentivize them by making it more beneficial, right? As long as that person gets to choose to renovate their home, fine, especially if they have to pay for it. Um, but then again, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. So, like, okay, if you're not going to force the individual, if you're going to force someone to renovate their own home, but have the government kind of subsidize it or pay for it, even, then okay, then what consequences come from the government paying for it, right? So, does that become more expensive, whatever that may be, whether it be putting solar panels or whatever, create more energy efficient things in the house, better insulation, so on. Um, Whatever it may be. Anyways, you have to look at the big picture. That's the problem with a lot of these things. And this is one of the things that I thought, and this comes from both sides too, not just like, say, like all the people who want like, more green energy, or the people who, and then there's the other side that says like, nothing. Or then there's the other side that talks about like how, green energy won't do anything or whatever it may be. Whatever their argument is, my problem always comes from the arguments themselves. It's like only you have to look at the big picture and the whole process to really make an educated decision, at least in my opinion. Um, if you don't do that, then it kind of like it's more of just like a political argument than anything else, which kind of doesn't really get anywhere. Which may be the point. Who knows? I wouldn't be all too surprised if a lot of this was basically just to get was like politicians just pandering to constituents or whatever. Um, but yeah, you just have to keep it in mind. And the whole point of this is to try to make educated decisions that actually make a difference, right? And so you have to kind of actually have intelligent discussions about this stuff, which is, by the way, as a side note, is fully welcome in the comments and stuff. The whole point of doing specifically these videos with, especially with renewable energies, is honestly, I haven't done a bunch of research into this kind of stuff. And so specifically with data and that kind of thing. And so one of the things that I'm doing right now is I found it's like a 650 page textbook on, from like some geophysics course or whatever, basically on mining and the whole like commodities industry, and like, how do we go from ground to product. And so basically that's another thing that I'm studying that we'll probably go through in future videos, just like trying to understand, okay, how do we understand this whole process and go from there. How do you actually make an educated decision on this stuff, which is significantly important. um, Another thing is investment. So they said that they're estimating 5.7 trillion per year until 2030, um, and then redirecting zero point 0.7 trillion annually away from fossil fuels to avoid stranded assets. Right. So from an investment standpoint, that's very bullish for the price of fossil fuels, at least from what I can tell. And that's definitely a way you can play it. And it's definitely an interesting dynamic because you have supply as well. If you're going into an industry that's already underinvested, and then you're like, okay, we need to redirect almost $1 trillion a year away from that industry, then very expensive oil might be on the horizon, if this is a thing, right? That's definitely something to keep in mind. Is that there are a lot of wow, there are a lot of cross currents to these kinds of things, and so you just got to keep an open mind and try to do it as much as possible. But yeah, that's all I got for this one. So, again, I guess biggest takeaways are some of the things that I've been thinking about, and how I think about these kind of things in general. And a lot of this too is my kind of how I think about everything. Is really try to understand as many different points of view as possible before I kind of formulate my own opinion. And so a lot of the times I'll say things that kind of provoke arguments from different perspectives, and really try to see um, and really try to kind of nitpick the arguments themselves, based on merit, and try to see from there. So yeah, that's all for this one. So I hope you guys have a good day, and I will see you on the next one.